Good afternoon and welcome. I'll give everybody a moment to join, and then we will begin this afternoon's great conversation. Well, shall we begin, Darry?
Yes, we can. Hello, Katrina.
Hello, good afternoon, and a very warm welcome to you this afternoon, and thank you so much for joining us today, and a big welcome to everybody who's kindly decided to join us this afternoon for our great conversational culture, strategy, and employee engagement. So building a great workplace, aligning those things, culture, strategy, and employee engagement for success. In the next just under an hour, what we'll do is talk together about this very exciting topic, and we'll give you a couple of opportunities as we chat to ask questions. And if you have any burning questions as you go, please do put them in the chat and we'll watch the chat. And just to let you know before we start that we're recording this afternoon session for anybody who couldn't join us today. So, well, I suppose the first thing to say is thank you so much, Darry Shibajo, for joining us. And I suppose the most lovely place is just ask you if you'd kindly introduce yourself.
Okay, thank you very much, Katrina, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. My name is Darry Shibajo. I lead the Human Capital Management team at ARM Holding Company. ARM is the largest non-bank financial services provider in Nigeria, and we have quite a number of subsidiaries along the financial services landscape. So that's me in a nutshell. Study HR, practice HR, love HR.
Thank you so much, Darry. And I should say it's a real privilege to have you here, and we very much look forward to hearing the richness of your experience and hopefully a little bit about ARM, which is a very successful organisation with a very strong employee culture. And we have the privilege of working with you on that and learning about the strength of the culture. And for example, overwhelmingly, 96% of people are proud to be with you, and a really strong journey to share. Before we talk a little bit more about that, would you mind sharing some highlights of your career to date?
Okay, thank you very much. I work in HR. I've had the opportunity to work in HR in Nigeria at least over the past 19 years, largely in financial services, a number of commercial banks, and then I started my career with Philips Consulting. Philips Consulting is the largest indigenous management consulting firm in Nigeria. And then I also had the opportunity to work at the Lagos Business School, which is the premier management education outfit in Nigeria as well. So evolving from a background in performance management into talent management and ultimately HR leadership, I've had the opportunity to be part of successful campaigns centered around driving people transformation and the emergence of people as the driving force in success in organizations. So that's what it has been basically over the past few years.
Thank you so much. So it's very much then, as you said, that lovely phrase, people as the driving force of success in organizations. That's very much what we're here to focus on today. And could you tell me a little bit more about ARM and perhaps what the people side of it and what values you live by, and just give us a little flavor?
Okay, thank you very much. And it's significant that we're having this conversation in the month of May because ARM celebrated its 30th anniversary this month. So ARM is 30 today, this month.
Wow.
And it largely is an organization that has evolved over the past 30 years from one entity to a number of major players in the financial services landscape in Nigeria, and has emerged a very reputable and responsible brand with its contribution to people development in Nigeria since then till now. There's barely any organization that hasn't had a flavor of top talent that has passed through the walls and corridors of ARM. And with every interaction, with every experience, there's that sense that you're relating with people with a strong and credible background and culture, and with a clear case of successful business results. We're proud to say that in the spaces that we play, along with our business strategy, we have consistently remained the top players, be it asset management, investment banking, pensions, private equity. I mean, not only locally, but globally. I think anytime you talk about success stories of organizations that have grown organically from this part of the world, ARM will proudly stand as one of those entities that has not only, contributed to economic development, but also in the lives of both its customers as much as its employees and every other person that has been associated with the brand till now. And of course, we're 30.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. A big milestone in, anyone's life, any organization's life. And how would you describe, I obviously know your job title, but how would you describe your role and what you do at ARM?
Okay. So I sit at the center, and ultimately is responsible for this function called human resources, or as anybody chooses to call it these days, because right now we have so many expressions of the human resource department. But yes, I lead HR across the group and service all of the entities that exist within the ARM group, and contributing to business strategy at its highest levels, but also taking from that business strategy and defining what the people management agenda is, both for the group and its subsidiaries. And of course, everything that HR is supposed to be to employees and everybody associated with the ARM ecosystem.
Mm. 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 So then about delivering a strategy by getting the people mix right, and also
Yes.
presumably focusing on the experience for those people. And
Yes.
what would you say you enjoy most about your job?
Honestly, impact. It's an easy question for me to answer, because personally, I'm driven by knowing that whatever I do contributes to some big picture. And being able to, in this role, take on what ARM has become till when I joined, and being able to do all of what I can to hand it over to the next set of people that will be coming, and recognizing that you've taken it from one point to the other, and there's a recognizable improvement in a way that maintains that legacy and sustainability, is something that for me is usually very rewarding. And then, that is even looking at it from the whole organization perspective. But when it comes to the nitty-gritty and, a smile from an employee, recognition of a job well done, success stories of impact, and how, being a member of a community is positive based on the kind of things that we do, is what, is most valuable. And that's why, the conversation around culture, the conversation around engagement, the conversation around success are stuff that I'm particularly passionate about, because that's ultimately what drives value. So yeah, it's straightforward for me: impact, impact, impact.
Thank you so much. And I think that brings us nicely along to what's the heart of our conversation today, around culture and how we engage as people, employee engagement. I suppose I'm interested. Why did you pick this as something for us to talk about today?
I think within the context of conversations around the great place to work and culture and all of what has become, top of mind within the world of work today, it's clear that on one part of the divide, executives and businesses are looking for success, are looking for profitability, are looking for sustainability. And on the other side of the divide, we have employees that are at various stages of their lives, are going through different priorities, be it social, be it economic. It stands to reason that the thing that brings everybody together in that small relationship is culture. On one hand, how do employees get what it is that enables them live rewarding lives? And how do organizations and executives build on the successes and get all of what they want to get out of being in business? And you see that culture is more or less that central point, right? And on one hand, again, recognizing that we're talking about success, and on the other hand, we're talking about people and what they want, and that's engagement. Understanding those dynamics and bringing everything together in a way that, is beneficial for all those stakeholders is a very interesting conversation that there isn't no right or wrong, but you find out that it's engaging, no pun intended, and you find yourself in the conversations continuously, and, it's rich, it's rewarding, and how wouldn't you get something of value, especially again within the confines of the Great Place to Work conversation. So for me, it's something I'd have loved to hear from others. It's something I've loved having to research for the purpose of this conversation. And it's my expectation that everybody that's part of this conversation today will get some value and can use it to continue to do the good work that they're doing wherever they find themselves.
Thank you so much, Derry. And I'm very struck by culture being at the centre and sort of the matching up of our needs as individuals at work and all our different profiles and needs. And then how do we come together to collaborate and deliver on what the organisation needs? So it's interesting, you kind of see it as the culture in the centre with the success brought by all the people, all of us pooling together our different talents and needs together. And culture is quite often described as sort of almost abstract. It's how things are done around here, those unspoken, unwritten rules.
Yeah.
If you had to sort of sum it up in a sentence, what would you say?
I mean, it's very easy to give that culture is who we are. That statement that basically just defines it. But I try to look at it from a tangible and intangible point of view, meaning the things you see and you don't see. See in terms of, and we're talking within the organizational context, of course, things like your mission, your vision, your dress code, your policies, and all of those things that, your core values, your mission, vision, and all of those kind of things that you can hold on to as say are indicative of your culture and, you can disseminate from. But there are also those very intangible yet important things that, define culture, like what's your approach to decision making, for instance? How do you react in times of crisis? When individuals join the organization, are they left to figure things out on their own? Or is there that general warm, attitude towards, oh, you're new, yeah, it's nice to meet you, blah, 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 and, that sense of we're in it together. And at the end of the day, I think all of it just, makes it a conversation that is continuous. You can't really, confine culture to the boundaries of it is a this, it is a that, it is a this, because it is always, something a lot more than you can express. And at the end of the day, you could say as much as you can't completely define a person's personality, it's the same way you can't completely say this is what culture is, because there would always be stuff that will come up that brings a different perspective to what you previously have understood to be culture.
So interesting. So I take from that is sort of, yeah, you've got these tangible written things that we can all hold up and say this is our mission, but then almost like an iceberg, perhaps, where some of it's on the surface, but there's a lot of it below. There are all these other aspects.
Exactly.
It sounds like it's kind of something that evolves as well. The
definitely
way,
so.
yeah, it's not a set in sand.
Exactly.
or set in stone, I should say.
Mm.
So then, what would you say is the importance of culture at ARM?
Wow.
Big one,
I
I know.
mean, it's at the core, it's at the essence of, the organization, because like I mentioned, it's a company from humble beginnings, driven by one person's desire to make a difference within an emerging space, and has evolved into a number of entities, and a community, of so many people that have strong memories of how the experience is like. It's almost like you can have a conversation with someone and find out that the person has worked in ARM, and you can describe the individual. You're like this, you're like that. This is what you're capable of doing. This is what you have done. It sits strongly in everything that we say we are, and it can't be overemphasized. It's commonplace to hear, this is not how we do things at ARM. This is not ARM, or yes, this is ARM, because it's almost like you can. It's like, if you've been through it, if you've experienced it, you'll know what it is. But if you haven't, you will just have an idea, kind of. So it's really big. It's really big. It's a big part of all of what we do, and we are particular about it in all facets, both tangible and intangible.
Yeah. So how do you define the tangible part? Because it is this sort of
Yeah.
big evolving thing, but how do
Yeah.
you define, first of all, I suppose, how do you define the culture that you want to see in ARM?
Okay, so yes, and that's a very interesting question, because it's almost like you've asked two questions. You've
Mm,
asked, what's the culture like? And you've
yeah.
asked, what would you like the culture to be?
Yeah, which
Which
could be.
most times you find out that are two completely different things,
Mm,
because you can recognize that this is who you are. This is um, this is who you are, but also have that aspiration in terms of wherever it is that you say you are going to, and the culture that will enable you get there,
yeah.
right? So for me, I think it's most important to start by understanding who you are, what your culture is, because unlike strategy, and I'm sure we'll get there at some point, you can define your strategy. You can be told your strategy. You could be given a strategy, but with culture, it's you can't. So, and there's no bad or good culture. Let me make that pretty clear. There's no bad or good culture, but there are times when people think they are this, but they are not, right? In terms of culture, you can say you have a specific set of values,
Yeah.
and because of those values, you say this is your culture. But you now find out that in reality, especially recognizing leadership as that personification of that your culture, that you are a completely different organization from what you say you are. You can say you are warm, you are embracing, you are all about, uh, harmony with the workplace. But in reality, it's cutthroat, performance-driven, spare no consequences type thing. So I think it's important to really know thyself and know your culture, whatever it is. Then you can now be having the conversations around what is aspirational, what is ideal, and what can make it happen. And the only way you can know your culture is by observing yourself, observing your people, observing the trends of your people over the years, what has mattered to them, how they have reacted to certain decisions, the policies and procedures as they exist, and how they react to them. Because, like I mentioned, nobody will tell you your culture. You ultimately would have to find out what that culture is, and then ask whether it is what you would want it to be or not.
Yeah, so know thyself, and you need to do that
Know
by
thyself.
holistic means, as you said. That's quite
Yeah.
compelling, isn't it? Holistic means know your behaviors, your policies, and the interaction between leaders and behaviors and policies and practices, and holistically. And how do you measure your culture?
Um, to be honest, I'm not sure you can measure culture.
Mm.
That's the honest truth, because like I said, it's a combination of tangibles and intangibles. And how do you measure intangibles? I think there are different things to measure that will be an indication of your culture. So for instance, a lot of us in this part of the world will say, I measure culture by, for instance, the Great Place to Work rating. And I say that if I have a favorable GPW score, then that's my culture. I have a great culture. But ultimately, it doesn't say anything, that score doesn't say anything about who you are, which essentially is what you're trying to do. But I would say in attempting to measure culture, it's a combination of different things. Employer engagement will be an indication, even business results. Because if your culture is driving strategy and driving success, the fact that you are performing poorly is an indication of your culture not driving that strategy. So your business results will be an indication of culture, employer engagement, and all of the things that, are indicators of where you would want to be. Will be my opinion. But in itself, say you want to measure culture, I'm not so sure you can do that. But again, the other things around can be an indication of whether your culture is progressive or not, and what matters to you.
Yeah, so it's complicated. You're saying it's
Yes,
multiple data points and it's
exactly.
sort of shifting, but you have to
Yes.
use the evidence you've got then presumably to say, does our culture set us up well to deliver on this strategy? Mm. And so when using those various data points and trying to get a handle on the culture, how do you, again, perhaps big question, how do you drive the culture you need? So having identified here's where you're at, here's where we want
Yeah.
to be, how would you advise people to drive the culture they need?
Okay. Very, very interesting question. In determining what your culture is and determining what you would want it to be, or I know, you definitely are doing that with your people. So it stands to reason that in going on that journey, you're doing it with those people. And you can't carry people along on a shared understanding or a shared mission without communication. So it starts really by deciding that you're going to communicate, right? And communicate all the time, communicate in different ways, communicate at different levels. And when people say you're not communicating, you apologize and you communicate some more. So it starts from there, and having that mindset that you're going to have to always communicate. But beyond that, I think it really starts from leadership.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to say that leadership drives culture, but at the end of the day, whatever it is, that leadership isn't culture on its own. Culture is everyone. But leadership has a good way of, has a big role in determining how people perceive that culture, especially when you talk about exemplifying the traits and features of culture. So it has to be that leadership is involved in that conversation as well. Not just in terms of defining culture, but reflecting how important it is to everything that we do. Policies, processes, strategies don't exist without leadership approving them anyway. So they have to first do that and then begin to live it in such a way that people see, people can follow, and people can buy into. And then, of course, um, tracking all of what you say you're going to do, trying, failing, trying, tracking, monitoring, and just evolving over time, recognizing that, like you've said, it's a constant state of evolution, and you're never really going to get to a point where, hey, we have achieved my culture,
Done.
right? We're done. There's no such destination. It's a continuous thing, right? So that's what it is really. But it's a combination of those kind of things: communication, leadership, involvement, tracking, and progress.
Honestly, so it sounds like it's something you constantly need to be intentional about where
Yeah.
we're at in culture, understand where we're at, where we want to be, and keep driving towards that interaction that will help you deliver on your strategy.
Exactly.
Quite a few points along the way in our conversation today, we've touched on employee engagement. And that's part of it. And clearly, you said that leadership's a big part in defining culture. There's policies, there's practices, there's communication, and so on. But if we can, it would be good to focus for a minute on employee engagement. And
Okay.
so I'd just be really interested to know, how do you drive employee engagement at ARM? What do you, how do you support
Okay.
the experience?
Okay. So I think first of all, beyond AIM, I think employee engagement is really that emotional connection you have with the organization. It's, energy levels, really. And it is what makes employees decide to commit to the organization and at what level. So it stands to reason that for you to be able to drive employee engagement, there has to be that connection, there has to be that vibe. I need to know what's important to you, and I need to present it in such a way that you have that emotional connection that will make you, do over and beyond. And permit me to use the analogy of relationships, right, to describe this, because again, I mean, emotions are the heart of all types of relationships. So it's like seeing two people meeting for the first time and there's no emotional connection. There isn't any particular desire to want to do anything for that individual or, commit or sacrifice. But you find out that when feelings are involved, when emotions are involved, the things that you ordinarily wouldn't do for any other person, you find yourself wanting to do and being happy to do it, sacrificing your time, sacrificing your resources because of that emotional connection. And I think that's what employee engagement is about. But for you to be able to have that emotional connection, there has to be, there has to be chemistry. There has to be the language you speak that makes that connection happen, right? So, for instance, you will find out that there are people that will say their love language is, giving gifts, while some is acts of sacrifice. So, but you need to be particular about what makes that person connect with you, which means that you need to understand the individual. In this context, being the employee, right? You need to know, for instance, this is the composition of your workforce. This is what appeals to that composition of your workforce. And when you ask them, they've told you that this is what appeals to them. In technical terms, that's what's called your employee value proposition. But that is that sense of, if I want to be on this journey with you, if I want to be in this relationship with you, what am I getting out of it? Once you're able to define that and put that clearly in all of what you do when it comes to people management, chances are that that connection becomes natural. And you find individuals waking up at Sunday morning at 7 a.m. to go to that customer under difficult conditions and make things happen, right? And that's what employee engagement, in my opinion, is really about. How do you use tangible things to create the emotional connection that makes employees want to go over and beyond?
Interesting. It strikes me as you're talking, it's very powerful, and it feels like, correct me if I'm wrong, it feels like very much the individual is at the center of this, and it's getting those individual connections and treating your people as individuals, and that sort of, that big concept perhaps of fostering trust between us, so that I care and there's a good reciprocal relationship and I'm willing to go that extra mile. And at ARM, I wonder if you'd share a little bit with me about what strategies you have for listening to employees.
Okay, so we're heavy on getting feedback. And part of that strategy deliberately was getting involved in the Great Place to Work conversations, because as much as employees are willing to say anything and everything, it's been proven that having those kind of conversations with external sources, or when it's under conditions of anonymity, you get to really get the flesh out of it. So one of the key things that we do is, connecting with the Great Place to Work and getting both qualitative and quantitative feedback about how our people feel. And of course, the validation from the certification goes a long way, knowing that, we're talking about global subject matter experts as against just anybody. So that's a crucial element. But we don't just stop there, but have our own type of internal engagements where we are asking questions all the time. Sometimes a number of my colleagues will say we can be annoying when it comes to the kind of questions we keep on asking. But ultimately, is to be able to gather so much data that if you throw it into a pot and mix it around, it becomes a lot easier for you to get what you really need to do. And, the messaging just comes clear, right? So we do quite a lot of that. We measure employee experience on a monthly basis. And we come up with a monthly experience score based on the various touch points in the employee journey map. And of course, we're asking different respondents different questions on different stages of the employee journey. And we use that as a basis to say how well we are, creating that unique experience for our employees. But more critically, qualitatively, we get feedback that immediately helps us address certain things, both on a broader organizational level, but also the individual. So you can imagine when it's at your work anniversary, we were finding out that someone that joined the organization a year before wasn't satisfied with the onboarding process. And we're able to ask and resolve and clarify all of what is necessary at that level. And then, of course, ensuring that all of our policies, our practices are reflective of all of the feedback that we're getting from all the time, from all these various touch points. So we have like a 5-year strategic plan broken down into yearly operational plans that we, come up with on an annual basis. And those plans, we spend a lot of time going through all of the feedback we've received over the course of the year, the different initiatives that we ran and how people responded to them, feed into what we do the next year. And then we're constantly asking, does this work? Do you like this? Do you want us to do this again? If we're going to do this, how would you react to it? And then we get them involved in the process in such a way that even when they don't work out, we have people that are telling us that, yes, okay, we know why it didn't work. Because they were part of the process, it becomes a lot harder for them to criticize, and they are more accommodating of the improvement that's required. And we just continue to go on that journey. And what we've seen is to the high-level ratings that the Great Place to Work survey gives us, which we do once every 2 years. We've consistently seen improvements in all of the parameters, right? And we see that as an indication of we're not just doing the surveys, we're listening, we're co-creating, and then as we're tracking and monitoring, we're learning from the mistakes together, and we're co-creating. So it's a continuous cycle of improvement and refinement.
Thank you so much, Darius. Yeah, so as you say, continuous cycle. I was very struck by the word co-creation, and it feels like it's a dialogue. It's very much an ongoing, consistent dialogue through different channels to drive engagement. And I guess just stepping back, we've talked quite a bit about culture and the various ingredients that sum up to this notion of culture. And a leading question, but why would you say that culture is so important to delivering on strategy?
Okay, so since strategy is a sense of specific objectives you'd like to achieve over a period of time, it stands to reason that you are going to have to define how you want to achieve the strategy. Strategy will not achieve itself on its own, right? It's a sense of what needs to be done, how you're going to do it, and what you will get out of it that ultimately, leads to successful strategy. And how is behavior, what you do, right? And going back to where we started the conversation, what you do, who you are, ultimately is your culture. Yeah. So it is how you do things that determines whether you achieve your strategy. So you can define whatever it is as your strategy, but it is how you execute it, which are your behaviors and ultimately who you are, that determines that strategy, which is culture. So I think that's as simple as I can put it.
Yes, yeah, thank you. And how do you inspire your colleagues? Because it's absolutely compelling that the culture is the how that gets you to deliver the, as you say, the what of the strategy. How do you inspire other people that you work with that this is where it's at? This is important. That our behaviors and culture do matter.
Yeah, so I think the key word here is co-creation. It's co-creation, right? And that's that sense that whatever it is that we want to achieve, we are part of that process in some form. And because who we are, how we do things is co-created as well, and we have that sense of what it is, and we agree with it, chances are that, that energy, which is the employee engagement, brings out that ability to, ultimately achieve. So on one hand, you have co-created or you have co-defined culture, and you have co-created strategy. It is the engagement level, the passion, the energy you bring to it that ultimately determines success. So it is, at the end of the day, carrying as many people as is necessary, which is everybody along, right? And then agreeing and accepting, that's what we arrive at, and not an imposition from, either the top or the bottom that this is what it is and all. So if you are able to do that, chances are that, you're well on your way towards being able to truly achieve organizational success with culture not hindering. Because on the flip side, if there isn't that connect, your culture will ultimately be a negative factor to success.
Yeah, so it's not so, and I have the sense from what you're saying that you feel very much that it's about co-creating and getting everybody's energy and empowering everybody to deliver. Because I suppose my question was, how do you inspire people? But I think what you're more saying is it's all of us, it's co-creating, it's energy together. It's not pull rather than push, I suppose I would say. And there are so many more questions I'd like to ask you. I've seen a couple of questions coming into the chat, but maybe we'll have perhaps one more question asked and then see what's in the chat. And then I've got a few more questions if
okay, that's fine. That's fine.
Thank you. But so how would you persuade a skeptic that, as Peter Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast, and clearly you passionately believe that, but how would you persuade a skeptic who doubted the truth of that?
Okay, so I might be a little bit controversial on this because I can almost relate with some level of skepticism in that, whole paradigm, right? But I wouldn't go as far, but will stop and say that it is when culture is not aligned with strategy,
right?
That's the bigger problem, right? Because strategy in itself wouldn't exist without culture, right? And culture for culture's sake is aimless. So your culture is supposed to drive something. It's supposed to drive an achievement of something, right? Which is your strategy. I think the greater damage is not, I don't think the issue is which is more important. Is it culture or strategy? Because both exist and both serve to complement themselves. I think the greater issue is culture always aligned with strategy? And when there is no alignment, then ultimately you have a great culture or not, it doesn't matter. You have a great strategy or not, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it's not a great strategy if you don't achieve it, I suppose.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, that's it really. And culture without being able to, and that strategy without a progressive culture to enable you to achieve it will ultimately lead to failure.
Yeah, so it's hand in hand.
Yeah, so definitely. And it's the alignment that is most critical.
Thank you so much. Should we have a look and see what questions we have?
Yes,
and I can see in our Q&A. So thank you for your question. Somebody has asked us, can you give insight into the employee experience map journey? And I'm assuming they mean ARM, but
yeah. Okay, so ARM will recognize that the employee journey basically has what we call nodes. 5 nodes, basically. We, based on research and our own sense of it, we believe that the employee journey is all of what happens from when you join to when you leave the organization. And for us, we have been able to identify 5 key areas. attract, develop, retain, attract, onboard, develop, retain, and offboard, right? And with these nodes, we have determined that there are different stakeholders at different points running through these nodes, and there are different things that matter to these stakeholders. So we've designed simple surveys for these nodes, asking specific questions to specific stakeholders. And at the end of the day, the information that comes out from those surveys, both qualitatively and quantitatively, we use to improve those nodes. The idea being that the scoring gives a sense of whether we're doing right or wrong, and the qualitative feedback gives us specific things to address. And, I mentioned something about, at a work anniversary survey. So we do work anniversary surveys as an example. So it's a work anniversary survey, for instance, that we ask, so how has your experience been? What has been beneficial for you? What will make you still want to stay with us? And then when we hear that, individual A probably had a problem with the supervisor when they joined, and maybe they didn't feel that HR supported them as much as they should, then we immediately address that situation and then go back to when that person onboarded and ensure that that experience is not repeated. So that's an example of the kind of things that we ask as part of that experience, and ultimately helps us to see how well we're doing and what we need to improve on.
Yeah, so again, for me, it feels like it's back to the co-creation and the listening at each stage.
Exactly.
So it's
Exactly.
getting everybody involved again in shaping the culture in a sense, not just
I think
not
it's very
assuming,
important.
asking.
Yeah.
So then I might say the employee experience is driven by everybody because they can contribute.
Exactly.
What does it feel like and what could be better?
Yes.
Good.
And you're not asking everybody the same question at the same time. So it doesn't have that bore of, your engagement surveys. So for instance, at hiring stage, we're asking hiring managers candidate satisfaction. We're asking candidates whether, they've enjoyed the recruitment process. So that's giving us specific information about a specific area. And that individual is, more inclined to give you that feedback at that point in time, as against just doing one survey that you're asking 20, 30 questions, and the person can't remember when certain things happened. So they can't give that information at the point when it's useful. And because of that, the feedback also changes on a monthly basis. Because if I'm hiring this month, you are asking me this month. If I'm not hiring next month, you're not asking me next month. So you also get varying information that you can do some trend analysis and use to, improve your processes.
Thank you. Thank you. And this person also asks, what are the questions you ask on a monthly basis? And I know now that you ask, depending on your in the life cycle, you ask different things, but I wonder, are there set questions that you ask each month?
So I'm usually a fan of, developing things that work specifically for you. So there are a number. So part of what we also do is that we find out with the experience when we probably are not asking the right questions, or for one reason or the other, we see month on month, the trends on particular questions are the same. So it means that, it might not be important to ask, or even in getting the information, we find out that, okay, we could actually get more that can give us greater insights. So I think it's important based on the experience that matters to you and, going through it over time, to define what works for you. And then also recognize that even if it's worked for you today, in another 6 months, in another 9 months, something else could have come up, and then you might need to ask something different or not. So as against trying to walk towards getting a defined set of questions, I think is to go with the flow, find out what works, and then as you go through the process, also evolve. Again, that same co-creation mindset.
Yes. Yeah. So co-creation mindset, don't stand still, just go with the flow and think about what do I need now, not what have we clearly not what we've always done. Thank you so much. I can't at the moment see any other questions, which actually is brilliant because there's lots more that I'd like to talk to you about for the last couple of minutes. But if anyone has another question, now is the moment. Please do pose them. But because we've got a few more minutes until about 10 to for questions. But But wonderfully, perhaps then I could ask, how do you, just stepping back a couple of stages, one of the things that struck me along the way was the role of leaders. And you mentioned leaders as important in driving the culture. How do you support leaders to shape the culture?
Okay, so a very interesting question, because it's funny how in some research that I stumbled on, 95% of board executives believe culture is very, very important and should be considered in anything and everything that they do. But in reality, less than 40% actually have conversations around culture.
Yeah, so it matters,
So they,
but they
yeah,
don't
it matters, but
operationalize it.
it matters. It's the most important thing, but in reality, we're not doing anything about it. And it's a HR thing. HR is the owner of culture. HR should deal with all the things that matter around culture and all. And unfortunately, that isn't the case, because as much as culture is all about, all of us and what we think it is, I am more likely to state my opinion or perspective about culture in an organization based on what I see from people that I look up to, people that are in positions of authority, people that are able to, and that's even talking about the intangible side of things, right? Like I was giving as examples, how do I approach decision making? How do we deal with accountability? How do we deal with, those kind of things? Chances are that I look to those that are in, positions of greater authority and mirror them in the environment that brings us together, right? So for instance, for those of us that go to churches, the way we deal with the leaders in church and how they make us behave is different from how you deal with the leaders in your organization. But it's you, the same person. So what's making both different? The people that you follow, the people that you look up to. And then when you now even talk about the tangibles in terms of processes, policies, values, these are the things that leaders are responsible for, if not developing, but approving. So for instance, if I say my culture is X, it stands to reason that my policies, my SOPs and the likes are reflective of that culture. But
Yes.
if leadership doesn't recognize and accept those policies and says it should be something completely different, then that alignment is there from the beginning. So they not only give direction, but they also embody. And it stands to reason that HR's role is to constantly bring the culture conversation to the table, right? We are not going to say what the culture is for you. We are not going to, be the ones, constantly saying this is it and driving it. But HR has to recognize that its role is bringing culture into that conversation all of the time. Even when it's uncomfortable, even when leadership doesn't want to hear, culture has to feature in some form, right? And then, of course, the policies that makes it easier,
Yes, the
and
framework.
practices that makes it easier. Yeah. Your performance management process, your budgeting process, your strategy development process, those things that you
Oh, hello.
Hello, Petrina. Can you hear me?
Hello. Yes, I can perfectly.
Hi, so it's Dari who seems to have gone off the call.
I think so. Hey, Darry. I'm sure he'll be back in a moment.
Okay. Well, a great conversation thus far. Insightful in terms of the fact that we talked about the alignment of culture, strategy, and the likes, so to speak. And nice to hear Darius' perspectives around how there's a need to harmonize both parts. Also interesting to hear about his insights around the fact that 95% of leaders talk about strategy, about culture and the need or importance of culture, but in real sense, only about 40% gets really involved As a matter of fact, I believe that from what we do on a daily basis, it's probably even less than 40%. We have conversations with a lot of senior leaders, executive leaders, and it's always a case of when it comes to culture, let the HR people deal with it. Let those in human resources have those conversations, let them take those decisions. We are in support, but in reality, we don't really see the levels of support within those organizations. We've had surveys done where even amongst senior leaders, like executive management, that's where the biggest challenge lies, where even amongst themselves, within themselves, they don't even trust those conversations. They don't have honest conversations with themselves. And invariably, that it affects the culture that we see for these organizations.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And yes, there was so much in the richness of the conversation. And I think it's, for me, a fascinating insight that HR's role is to constantly surface the culture, not to dictate the way it should go, but to put the framework and constantly bring it to the table so that people are mindful of it. And I also love that statistic. About 95% of CEOs say it's important, but only 40% actively focus on it. But it's fascinating. I note, I hope that Dario may be able to come back to us in a moment, but I note we have another question which we could perhaps share our thoughts on, which is, whenever I survey employees, they don't participate, which is, for us at Great Place to Work, a really critical area where we support clients. And I'd love to hear more about if you'd like to join us in the conversation, whoever's posted that, please do. And for me, so I suppose, but for now, I could probably share some general thoughts on encouraging people to participate. And I don't know about you, Otemere, but for me, one of the most striking things is that when people come to work with us, typically response rates to surveys increase considerably because we provide that safe space, that confidential external space for people to take part. But nonetheless, I see one of our core duties as supporting organisations to communicate effectively about why a survey is confidential and is a great place to take part, and then taking enormous care in looking after data and preparing results and sharing the data, for example, only in groups so that people feel more comfortable to participate, but also in supporting clients to do something with surveys so that then there's a virtuous cycle where employees are more likely to take part. But I would genuinely love, if you'd like to either speak now or contact us afterwards, we'd love to chat more about encouraging participation and any specifics around that you may have. I don't know, Otemere, if there's anything you'd add to that question response.
Well, we'll see that trust is key for that. People are looking to have share insights. It's usually a case around the lack of trust. There is a company we currently are surveying, and that survey has gone on for quite a while now. We've not been able to close as we have loved to. And we see and we expect that when the results are out, it's going to be issues around trust. The trust to say, am I sure that because in the past, we've done something similar in the past, and management either came hard on me or didn't implement what they said or what we asked them to do. But the beautiful thing about our survey is that with the surveys, there's high levels of confidentiality that comes with it. There's something we call the suppression rule at Great Place to Work. With the suppression rule, if you have less than 4 employees within a demographic space or within the department, we don't provide you insights to what that team is saying, because there's a great possibility that if you have less than 5 people within a team provide feedback on a survey, maybe Petrina knows who in that team has said what. So Great Place to Work survey recognizes that fact. And so there's something called the suppression rule that prevents even us from getting that information to say what the result looks like for a team that is less than 5 people. And so what we normally would do and advise companies to do is that if you have a team that has less than 5 people, you can merge 2 teams together. For instance, you can merge admin and finance so that you are able to provide a feedback around that combined team and go on to push for interventions or conversations beyond like a focus group session to get inputs around why employees have scored or responded in the way that they have done. I don't know, I think I can share my slides because we basically are running out of time here now, Petrina. A couple of slides I want to show.
And that's
so
all of
just
our
allow me to do
questions.
that.
So thank you so much to our
okay.
audience for contributing those. It's been a really powerful session, and I hope Dare may rejoin us. Thank you.
May rejoin us, but before he comes on, just a minute. Because Dare talked about impact, and it's something that we don't talk about too often at Great Place to Work. But at Great Place to Work, I just felt like there was a need to share something about our impact globally. It's about an organization like ours where founded in 1992 to be precise, and to date we've done over 100 million surveys across the globe. That speaks to great levels of understanding. It speaks to great levels of professionalism that comes to bear for what we do. It speaks to great levels of acceptance of our processes and policies and practices. It also speaks to the fact that being able to, on an annual basis, get to work with about 18,000 employees across organizations across the globe, 20 million employees in 170 countries annually. It speaks to the fact that there is, without a shadow of doubt, that we are doing something right to effectively impact organizations, to effectively provide a clear voice for employees, to be able to speak up and be able to have a presence within the organization, because we know that eventually, and when we have those conversations with MDs, is to say to them that when employees speak up, you are bound to hear what they are saying around certain issues, and it enables you to provide interventions. And when those interventions are in place, employees become more engaged, employees become more productive at work, and invariably it affects positively your bottom line. I also say that our mission is basically very simple: is to help every place to become a great place to work for all. There's something else I wanted to share. Just a minute, if I could get to that slide. Just a minute. Okay, I was going to share this to say, in Great Place to Work Nigeria, basically is about building a community of great workplaces. And we say to people, imagine if 10% of organizations in Nigeria are great workplaces. Imagine what we would do to the economy of Nigeria. So yes, government has its role, but the private sector also has a major role to play to achieve those objectives. And we would like to say, for those who haven't taken the Great Place to Work survey, to please come join us as we go on to embark on this great mission of ensuring that 10% of companies in Nigeria are great workplaces. I think that's what I'd like to share this time, Petrina.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing, and a very big thank you to everybody who chose to join us this afternoon for your care and listening and very valuable questions. And of course, a very big thank you to Dare. And yes.
Thank you.
All the best.
Thank you very much. We're looking forward to the next episode, which should happen on the 6th of June this year. We're going to have a very, very exciting topic to discuss, and we will definitely get you the notice across to you shortly. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Goodbye.
Bye.